name is Jonathan Hall, and I did my final paper and my final paper presentation on Western justice and its impact on Native Alaskans. So, and kind of when Western justice was imposed upon Native Alaskans, there were some key differences. Western justice, as we all kind of know, is very adversarial. There's a clear winner, there's a clear loser, and most of the time you're kind of butting heads at each other and really trying to rip into each other and to basically come out on top and prove guilt or innocence. Traditional Native justice is kind of variable depending on the group that you're referring to, and there were different ways of really going about it, about solving disputes or making a settlement, and some groups had very complicated ways of dealing with it. Others didn't. Many typical solutions, as we've learned through the justice unit, was to there was forms of restitution and other payment, and along with that, there's more serious forms of punishment, such as banishment. So the Alaska Native Commission report was done around the mid-90s because there was this really tremendous gap in just how many Native people were in the criminal justice system and in the prison system. And so the Alaska Native Commission report was kind of put together to try and figure out what was going wrong and maybe try to explain some of it. And it found that there were three main tenets that many of the Alaska Native population kind of followed or practiced, and those were non-interference, non-confrontation, and truth-telling. So, for non-interference, I used the example of Rachel King. She was a district attorney in one of the rural regions in Alaska and dealt with a lot of Native Alaskan, I want to say it was Inupiat, I'm pretty sure it was Inupiat, clients. And she found that there was that non-interference kind of played a big role in some of the responses she got from her clients. A lot of the times they would say things like, when she'd ask how they wanted to proceed, she would say, or the clients would say, I just want to do my time, or whatever you think is best, so she didn't get a direction. And they didn't like to really interfere with what King was doing. And then non-confrontation. So right off the bat, the whole justice system is confrontation. It's very adversarial. You're pitted against someone else, and you're trying to prove that you're right and that the other person is wrong. Moreover, in prison situations, there's also confrontation. The Alaska Native Commission report also found that a lot of the times in prison situations, Native Alaskans were, they acted differently. They didn't try to immediately dominate the surroundings as many prison guards were used to seeing. According to the Alaska Native Commission report, they were much more reserved, and they kind of entered into a state of careful observation, if you will. That's the way that the Alaska Native Commission report kind of coined the term. And then truth-telling. So, can we all see why this is not the best ethic to carry while you're in the criminal justice system? I think it was Rachel King. She discovered that, her clients were more likely to confess than not for whatever reason. still kind of paying that same price. So where did truth-telling come from? Lisa Yeager wrote a kind of historical perspective on kind of where restorative Native historical justice came from and kind of the history of the Native justice system. And she mentions the village councils, which maybe some of us are familiar with from wherever we live. Kind of a more recent occurrence in the span of things, and they happened in the mid-20th century. That was kind of a different take on the Western justice system. It was kind of a form of a village council. And those village council would hear cases and, just kind of smaller cases, and they were really focused on an admission of wrong and a promise to do better by the accused. So, really, that's part of where the truth-telling came from. So you had village councils that focused on the admission of wrong and trying to get the community back to work cohesively and be cohesive in and of themselves. Some other cultural differences in Rupert Ross's book, Dancing with a Ghost. I guess I should talk about Rupert Ross. Rupert Ross was he was an attorney in one of the northern regions of Canada, which I know is in Alaska, but it's still pretty close, right? So with one of the groups that he was dealing with, he mentions that he discovered that eye contact in that specific culture and a group of Native people was considered rude, and that avoiding eye contact was actually a sign of respect. And when he mentioned that when he had someone on stand, they would avoid eye contact, and they were doing so out of respect. But if you're avoiding eye contact on the stand in a Western view, that's viewed as you're being dishonest. You aren't telling the truth, and when you're on the stand, you aren't telling the truth. You aren't really, and it's kind of obvious. It's not really making a good point. So he mentions that, wow, we could have put away dozens of people just based on that alone that could have potentially been innocent. And that's something that he noted in his book. Next is, I want to talk about Harold Napoleon. So he was a successful man, a Native man that grew up in rural Alaska, and he was one of the heads of Doyon, I want to believe, somewhere in the late 20th century. He was actually an alcoholic, and in the course of one of his drunken bouts, he actually murdered his son, and he was sentenced to prison. And while he was in prison, he wrote the book Yuyarik, The Way of the Human Being. And he kind of, in this book, he kind of goes over how to continue moving forward in the future with the way things for the Native people. And his theory is that many of the Alaska Native people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder that stems from what he terms, or what he coins as, the Great Death. And what that was it was mass death that occurred around the 1920s in Nome. That stemmed from disease, and that was traumatic for a lot of Native people. It was a lot of family members and a lot of villages being completely destroyed in a very short amount of time, and the entire way of life really changed after that. There were also, generations of abuse stemmed from that. Alcohol. He believes that kind of a narcotic relief from that PTSD. And he also believes that, alcohol is one of the biggest, well, it is, one of the biggest reasons why there is this giant overrepresentation of Native Alaskans in the criminal justice system. Another issue is policing. So, in a lot of these rural communities, there's just not enough officers, enough troopers to really reach everybody. It's too widespread. The time to travel, it's too much. So the kind of solution to that was the VPSO program. And the VPSO program, it isn't a bad program per se, but VPSOs generally, they don't have the authority to do the same things that a trooper would have, and their job is really spread out over different areas. So they do more than a trooper, but they don't have the same authority. So they aren't quite that same, they don't have the same authority to really do what a trooper would do, which is part of the problem. There's just not enough resources to police the rural areas effectively. Going back to Napoleon, he mentions this phenomenon that as the physical needs are met for the Native Alaskan population, the overall happiness seems to go down. And he doesn't give a clear-cut explanation for this, but he kind of hypothesizes that might be because there's this lack of independence, and whether or not that's 100% true is kind of up for speculation. But yeah, as things like running water become more abundant, these physical needs are met, the happiness level of these people seems to go down. And Napoleon, like I said, doesn't really know why. He's not 100% sure, as it's kind of impossible to be. But moving forward, Ross King and Napoleon all agree that the way to move forward is to reinstate some form of self-governance to the Native people of Alaska and the communities therein. And they believe that kind of setting their own ordinances and really dealing with the criminal populations themselves, maybe as far as, kind of domestic disputes and alcoholism and things like that within the population, within the communities themselves, is the best way to move forward. But Napoleon specifically recognizes that is something that Congress would have to do, because Alaska doesn't actually have the authority to overdo or redo what has already been set. It would have to be Congress. And whether that's particularly high on their to-do list, I kind of doubt, but they all see the way to kind of really fix the issue is to reinstate self-governance and to regain that independence. And that's really my concluding thought. Thank you for watching.